Greetings, everyone. I am Charles Kovach, your not safe for work presidential candidate, campaigning on the platform of bringing everyone a more direct democracy. And as usual, I am making these videos in order to garner some attention towards my candidacy by talking about all the horseshit that you and I are supposed to swallow and looking at some of the things that catch my attention. So to start off this video, I want to say that I really enjoy the Gray Zone. People like Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal do really good work over there. And the first two things I want to talk about are things that they recently did reports on. The first, I believe Aaron Mate was interviewing somebody, and this person was revealing that every single second that Julian Assange was in the Ecuadorian embassy was caught on videotape. And I forget by who, but this includes when he was meeting with his lawyers and just really everything. There wasn't a safe spot in the entire spot that he was staying at that he wasn't being recorded. So when the media says the mainstream tabloids say that Assange was like spreading feces all over the wall and all that kind of stuff, well, now we can all say, show us the tape. Yeah, and I would still like to point out that Assange is still imprisoned for the crime of revealing to all of us different war crimes that have been committed. Another good thing that the Gray Zone reported on recently was about Venezuela. So the brutal dictator Maduro, who's such a horrible person, has these programs that for people that can't afford to feed themselves, they get sent food. I mean, that's such signs of a completely and totally brutal dictator that's irrevocable. Another thing is that the government is also helping communities build housing. Apparently, there's a housing apartment complex that's being built in a commune that's being supplied by the Venezuelan government. This is all just really horrible stuff, and apparently it really needs to end. And again, I'm not saying one way or another about Maduro, but if you're going to point out one thing, you better be ready to point out the other. And as far as food, well, apparently Venezuela requires a lot of its food, or used to require a lot of its food from imports, but now, thankfully, they all have more food that's being produced in their country that can be purchased for money gouging prices. And once again, I would like to say that I noticed that all the people that support Maduro are poor like me and don't dress well, and they tend to be of a darker skin color. And all the people who are for the U.S. intervention and Guaido are wealthy and of a lighter skin tone. That's just something I noticed. I don't know if that means anything, but, yeah, it's just a thing I noticed. But yeah, the Trump administration is still trying to hammer down the Venezuelan economy, just like Obama did, and just like every rich person wants to have happen, so that we can once again bring democracy to the land, which means killing off everybody so we can take all the resources. As I explained in my oh so tired video yesterday, man, it's just been a really bad week for insomnia. But speaking of Trump, there's still all this talk of impeachment. Of course there is. The Democrats going after Trump is kind of like Gabriel going after Satan in the movie Constantine. There's just they're both fucking corrupt, and one's just always going to use the other's corruption against them to weaken them. It's fucking stupid. I mean, now Trump, I know I've called him a blithering idiot and other such things. He's not a very knowledgeable person. I don't think he's a very intelligent person, but just because somebody's not very knowledgeable and not very intelligent doesn't mean that they can't learn anything and can't figure out anything. I mean, realistically, I may seem smart to a lot of people, but that's just because I figured out a lot of tricks of how to learn and apply different things. And Trump seems to be a similar case when it comes to things like dealing with corrupt people because, well, just look at his business past. So, yeah, Trump getting impeached, probably not going to happen. And if it does happen, you know, again, Pence, you know, realistically, all of the rich people not liking Trump is more akin to, oh, but mommy, I don't like it when you finger my asshole. I like it when daddy fingers my asshole. He does it much better. That's really what it's akin to. So, speaking of legal processes, I wanted to read to you a statute. This statute comes from the Ohio State Code. This is particularly Code 2917.13, misconduct at emergency. A. No person shall knowingly do any of the following. 1. Hamper the lawful operations of any law enforcement officer. And god damn it, I should have put on my glasses, but oh well, I'll fight through it. Law enforcement officer, firefighter, rescuer, medical person, emergency medical services person, or other authorized person engaged in the person's duties at the scene of fire, accident, disaster, riot, or emergency of any kind. 2. Hamper the lawful activities of any emergency facility person who is engaged in the person's duties in an emergency facility. 3. Fail to obey the lawful order of any law enforcement officer engaged in the law enforcement officer's duties at the scene of or in connection with the fire, accident, disaster, riot, or emergency of any kind. And I am going to come back at this one really hard in a minute. Okay, bravo. Nothing in this section shall be construed to limit access or deny information to any news media representative in the lawful exercise of the news media representative's duties. Charlie, whoever violates this section is guilty of misconduct at an emergency, except as otherwise provided in this division. Misconduct at an emergency is a misdemeanor of the 4th degree. If a violation of this section creates a risk of physical harm to persons or property, misconduct at an emergency is a misdemeanor of the 5th degree. Delta, as used in this section. 1. Emergency medical services person is a singular of emergency medical services personnel, as defined in section 2133.21 of the revised code. 2. Emergency facility person. Yeah, definitions. Okay, we don't really care about that. So, why am I reading to you Ohio State law? Well, apparently, there was some guy who was on his porch filming the militarized profiteers arresting somebody, and as they were arresting somebody, by the way, all the officers were dressed up in full camo and helmets and whatnot. So while they were arresting somebody, decided to smack the person they were arresting, which apparently was a kid. I mean, it looked like a kid from my perspective. And when this guy informed the militarized profiteers that they were not allowed to do that, they told him to go back inside. And I forget what else. But since he said no, they walked onto his property and proceeded to arrest him. And now he's being charged with misconduct at an emergency. I watched the video. Nothing he did qualifies anything I said out of that statute. And here's the part that I said I was going to hit home on. A person is only required to follow a lawful order. If an order is not lawful, you don't have to do shit. Just because a police officer says that you have to do something does not make it... I'm sorry, I keep forgetting, you know, the day and age we live in. The militarized profiteers. Just because they say you have to do something, that does not make it a lawful order. Okay? This is illegal. And the police officers, militarized profiteers, should know what constitutes a lawful and an unlawful order. They are supposed to be trained on this. Something I doubt happens. There is no... and I would challenge any person to show me law that requires a person to follow an unlawful order or to enact an unlawful order in any way. The Uniform Code of Military Justice, Article 92, said that all military service members are required to follow lawful orders. They are not required to follow unlawful orders. If something is an unlawful order and you follow it, there's no defense that I was just following orders. And this does not only apply to American law, this applies to international law as well. There's no excuse of I was just following orders from anybody in the American law enforcement or military. Nothing protects them from doing things that are illegal except corruption. I want to make this point very clear because there are a lot of people who do not understand this fact, both in the services and out of the services. So, that's why I said the other day, how can you tell a good cop from a bad cop? You can't, because they both wear the same uniform, okay? This is how. And speaking of police, one of the things that apparently flew under my radar before had to do with the Amber Geiger case. Apparently there was a discrepancy between her recollection of the situation and ballistics. So, yeah, it seems that she was a little more dishonest than I would like to have believed. But still, the whole situation of walking into somebody else's apartment when you're half asleep, okay, that part on its face, I can't really take, find a whole lot of fault with, and the situation on its own. It's not so much whether people make mistakes, because people are going to make mistakes. I've said this before. I'm human, you're human, we're all human, we're all going to make mistakes. But as someone notable and apparently forgettable once said, it's not whether or not you make mistakes, it's what you do in the face of them. I mean, I've made mistakes, and I'm pretty sure one of the things I've said was about Kavanaugh, calling him a rapist or something like that. I mean, I don't like the guy, but that doesn't make it okay for me to say something that is a falsehood. And apparently, as I learned recently from the Real News Network, I think it was, that one of his accusers was actually a person that worked for the Clintons. Oh, and apparently from my video yesterday, I don't see race, because that was in Title VII also, and I said doesn't discriminate or doesn't protect discrimination from ethnicity, but yeah, it said race in there. But yeah, that's all for this video. Once again, my name is Charles Kovach. I am running for presidency to bring a more direct democracy to this country. Maybe, hopefully, one day we can help bring it to the world, and not just democracy, by not interfering with every other country's goings-on. But yeah, if you are somebody who wants to have more of a decision in the say of what goes on in your lives as through government and whatnot, and not just leave it up to the rich and those seeking power, please spread please spread the message. Please make people aware of me, and so forth. And I thank you for your time.